Hello, gentle viewers. This is Guardian, welcoming you back to Baseball 103 with Out of the Park Baseball 26. In this episode, we're going to talk about pitching statistics. While you're looking at hitters, don't worry about it. There you go. Now you're looking at pitchers. Anyways, I want to talk about an important stat before we get into how to judge pitchers because I think it's really important to keep in mind. In 2001, a guy named Forrest McCracken published in Baseball Prospectus a story that would quite literally change baseball statistics. Called Pitchers and Defense, How Much Control Do Hurlers Have? Reinvented something called Defensive Independent Pitching or Pitching Statistics for DIPS. Why is DIPS important? We talked about this a little bit last week, but I want to spend more time on it now. When a pitcher throws a baseball, they have control over certain parts of it. Pitchers are very good at controlling strikes, balls, and home runs. So strikeouts, walks, and home runs. So why does this matter? For the longest time, pitchers would just be really good one year and really bad the next year, and we wouldn't know why, and we wouldn't know how. But enter something called BABIP, or batting average on balls in play. So why does all this make sense? If I'm a pitcher and I'm throwing a baseball, I can control, roughly speaking, where that pitch ends up. If I'm a good pitcher, if I know what I'm doing, I can make sure the pitch goes where I want it to go. That means I can make you swing at something you shouldn't, and I can make you not swing at something that you should. I can control the strike zone. That is something that pitchers have within their control. Is there randomness? Are there other factors? Absolutely. But by and large, there's a high correlation between strikeouts and walks, and if either of those things changes, especially the rate stats, you know something is wrong. Or something is right if it goes up, or if it goes really highly all of a sudden. Okay. That's where we start this discussion. Okay. Pitchers are controlled if they strike out, they control if they walk. Home runs are also highly correlated from year to year. Pitchers that tend not to give up home runs in one year tend not to give them up in future years. This is because, again, if you put the ball where you want it to go, you can generally avoid giving up home runs. You can't avoid them entirely, not in the modern game, but you can reduce it. But what happens the other times? These three true outcomes, so to speak, strikeouts, walks, and home runs. There are so many factors for what happens there that's essentially a noise. It's meaningless. Because you can't predict it. It's difficult to say if a pitcher is actually pitching well or his defense is really good behind him, or the home plate umpire is giving him a heads up on the strike zone. If his team is scoring lots of runs, he gets to pitch from in front, which means he doesn't have to try quite as hard. All this is to say that BABIP doesn't stay constant from year to year to year. And let's look at a modern example of somebody that people could arguably say is one of the best pitchers that's ever thrown a baseball. Greg Maddux. Let's look at his BABIP numbers. It's also fun to say BABIP, which isn't one of the reasons I like the stat, but it is kind of fun. I just looked at it. I swear to God, I just saw it. Here it is. On average, Greg Maddux's BABIP was 285, meaning when a hitter put the ball in play and it wasn't a home run, they hit about 285 off of him. That's not entirely accurate, but that's a good benchmark. When people put the ball in play against him, they hit 285. Once someone has pitched for about 3 years or so, their BABIP started letting you have a pretty good sense of what's going on there. Why am I giving you this important context? In 1987, as a fresh-faced Chicago Cub, Greg Maddux had a BABIP of 329. Does that mean he was a bad pitcher? Not necessarily. Other numbers are far more important and far more predictive of whether someone is actually pitching very well. Especially when, and let's take an example here of another year where his BABIP was kind of high. 300. You don't want hitters hitting 300 against you, right? But he was a significantly better pitcher. Why? His walk rate dropped. His home run rate cratered. He gave up fewer hits, and the hits he did give up weren't as hard. He was a significantly better pitcher in 1990 than it was in 1988. And that's why it's so important to think about BABIP. If a pitcher's BABIP is unusually high, you have to take into account that when you're evaluating his statistics, his raw numbers. Because he might have pitched worse for reasons that have nothing to do with his actual skill level, which is what you want to know. When I'm looking at somebody's stat lines, I want to know, can he reproduce this year in and year out? BABIP creates so much noise because it's something out of the pitcher's control that if somebody's BABIP is really high, they'll look like a worse pitcher, but that doesn't mean they actually are a worse pitcher. Like things like ERA is going to go up because they're giving up more hits, but what matters most are the fundamentals, the peripherals it's called. The stats around the common stats. That's those your pitchers actually having a good season. For a very long time, and we'll talk about this stat in a little bit, you are told if you can't win 20 games, you're not a very good pitcher. Then clearly Greg Maddux is the worst pitcher that ever lived because he only got to 20 games twice. Does that sound right to you? It certainly doesn't sound right to me. Because it's also something that's not out in their control, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but knowing BABIP, knowing this idea that pitchers don't control what happens to the ball if it's not a home run and somebody hits it, is so fundamental to our understanding of modern baseball that it's crucial that you have this down. How do you know it's important? You even see it on broadcast sometimes. You even see it on Major League broadcast sometimes when people talk about BABIP for pitchers. It applies to hitters too. It can tell you if hitters been unusually lucky or unlucky that year, but it's really useful for pitchers. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So it's not one of my official statistics for this video, but I wanted to explain it because it'll make everything else seem more sensible. So we have 20 statistics to talk about today. Apparently adding 15 and 5 together is too much for me. And we're going to talk about 20 stats in pitching that you need to understand, know when to ignore them, and when to incorporate them in your analysis to determine if your players are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. Number 5, stat to avoid is a twofer. You're welcome. Hit by pitch and wild pitches. These are both bad things. Hitters that do this a lot are generally not good pitchers, or are they? What these are both measures of is how wild a pitcher is, but that doesn't make the pitcher bad necessarily. Let's talk about a pitcher that I think many other people know and maybe love, Randy Johnson, who is now a professional photographer, which is really cool. Where is it? Nope, it's batting stats 1, isn't it? Maybe? Yeah. 1992, 13 wild pitches. That's a lot of wild pitches. How many batters did he hit that year? It's HP here. I know it's tracked here. I'm gonna have to look at a specific. I'm gonna have to look at their stats in context, but HP's hit by pitch. Basic baseball. If the pitcher hits the batter on his body, he goes to first base. It's called, for hitters, it's called HPP, hit by pitch. For pitchers, it's called HP for a hit pitch. So, you plunk the batter, bad news. WPs, or wild pitches, means you threw the pitch and I got past the catcher. This does not mean you were a bad pitcher that year. What it means is that you tended to be wild. And point of fact, the year that Randy Johnson allowed 13 wild pitches, he had one of the lowest rates of hits per 9 in the league because he struck people out all the time. He also walked people all the time. Randy Johnson was a land of contrast in 1992. I bring all this up because these two statistics look kind of sexy in the stat sheet, and people go, ooh, ah. But they don't really tell you that much. They don't really give you a meaningful picture of whether the pitcher is actually good or bad or not. While pitches are bad, hitting the hitter is mostly bad, but that doesn't mean that the pitcher isn't pitching well. And they also don't correlate from year to year. The same guy that got 13 wild pitches in 1992 got 8 the next year, got 5 the year after that. Had 0 in 1998, although he was admittedly injured that year. Sorry, he got traded. Yeah, he was injured that year, I think. Maybe not. Either way. So, not very predictive. That's the big reason. Balks are also thrown in the same category. They're just something you can't really control. And they're not necessarily bad when they happen. There's also an additional level to this, which is some people hit a lot of batters because that was their game. Here they are. Yeah, hit by pitches. Look at this. Randy Johnson hit people pretty regularly. Why did Randy Johnson hit people so often? Is it because he's a bad player? No, it's because he likes to pitch inside, which is actually a hallmark of being a good pitcher. You want to pitch the pitch in such a way that the hitter can't extend over the plate and drive the ball. You want to get in on the hands. So a lefty like Randy Johnson wants a pitch that bears into righties, but stays like kind of tight on lefties. If you pitch in, you will hit hitters. It's just part of the game. Then again, there's also macho bullshit that's part of it. Let's look at a guy who very famously said he would knock down his own grandmother if she was crowding the plate. Early Wynn. A former Indian, a Washington Senator, a Chicago White Sox. He didn't hit that many pitchers over his career, but he had the reputation of doing it. And the reputation is almost as good. Somebody who genuinely did hit a lot of people is Dizzy Dean. I just called him Duzzy. Oh my god. Dizzy Dean was, even he didn't have that many hit by pitches. Interesting. I guess another guy who had... No, I know who I'm thinking of. Sorry. Wrong DD. Sorry. Wrong initial. Right initials, wrong guy. Yeah. Don Drysdale. He did it because he was nasty. There is a long tradition of if certain things happen during a baseball game by the unwritten rules, you hit the batter. You plunk him, generally somewhere fairly safe. Just to show, hey, you can't do this shit to me. You can't show me up. You can't hit home runs off of me. Because Don Drysdale did enjoy giving up home runs over his career. For sure. Does it make him a bad pitcher? No. But it is generally a questionable decision to ever put somebody on base for free. It is generally a bad idea. Sometimes you can't control it. Other times you can. But they're not predictive. It doesn't mean they're a bad pitcher. It just means they're maybe making a bad decision in the heat of the moment. Or they were just unlucky. Not something to get obsessed about. Quality starts. I can explain what a quality start is very easily, but I can't show you historical numbers because OOTP doesn't track them. It doesn't for some people. Here we go. Here's an example. We've got some numbers here for Don Drysdale here. A quality start happens when a pitcher pitches 6 or more innings and allows 3 or fewer runs. That makes it a quality start. So in 1962, Don Drysdale had 41 starts, and 30 of them he went 6 or more innings, and he allowed 3 or fewer runs. That's a quality start. Is that a bad thing? Absolutely not. If a pitcher can make quality starts, they're actually doing a great job. Pretty much without question. It's hard to say somebody who gets you a quality start every single time is having a bad year. That's a difficult argument to make. However, notice another number. 19 complete games. There were not 19 complete games in the entire Major Leagues last year. A complete game is when a starting pitcher pitches every pitch in a game, from the very first one to the very last one. It doesn't happen anymore. It just doesn't. I'm going to talk about why that is a little bit later on in the video, but just take my word for it. Um, People don't throw complete games anymore. People don't even go deep into baseball games anymore. Let's look at the National League Rookie of the Year. A fantastic pitcher named Paul Skeens, who you may recall if you're a longtime fan of the channel. We had him with the Oakland A's um, that one season. We don't know how many quality starts he actually had, but he probably didn't go 6 innings in a start last year, would be my guess. Does that make him a bad pitcher? No. Pitchers just don't go as long as they used to, for a long variety of reasons. Let's look at Garrett Cole. What does he look like? Garrett Cole, American League Cy Young winner last year. Fantastic year. Quality starts, 33 the year before. That feels pretty good, right? But then, oh, the year before he had 0 and 8. Was he a worse pitcher those years? No. He just didn't go as deep into games for one reason or another. 2020 is a bad example because of the pandemic, which meant people didn't pitch all that much. But that's what I want to get across here. If you can get quality starts, that's great. But you're not going to get them at the same clip as a Don Drysdale did. I also don't believe them here. I don't believe that every single start in 2023 was a quality start for him. There's some fuckery going on in these numbers here. These numbers all feel wrong. But look at Baseball Reference really quickly here. Garrett Cole, Baseball Reference. This is an issue with the engine. I don't think it's an issue with how he actually pitched. Let's see here. I want to know his quality starts. Quality starts. Do they not keep track of those anymore? That would be annoying if they don't. That'd be very annoying if they don't. Let me look up US. Sorry, US. That's not there. Quality starts, Garrett Cole, 2024. It may just be something they don't track very much anymore, but I'm sure somebody does. I'm sure somebody does. It might be something that people don't track anymore, which is good if they don't, but it is something that is in here. It is in this game, so it's something to consider. But it is important to keep in mind that it just doesn't matter because 6 innings are hard to come by these days. I'm trying to see if I can find the number here. Yeah, okay. This says 12. Which seems a lot more realistic. Oh, somebody else is also saying they had 8. So that's what StatMuse says. Interesting. I'm not saying that I doubt it, but I am saying that it's difficult to say for sure. Baseball Savant. Baseball Savant is a really, really good website. By the way, if that's something that interests you, I highly recommend it to you. But I don't think they actually track quality starts. Yeah, it's being tricked by other things that are in there, but regardless, that is what we're talking about here. That's why it's not a very good stat, because quality starts just don't happen very much anymore. So, it's in the game. Somebody gets quality starts is generally a good pitcher, but don't make it your end-all be-all for judging whether pitcher's having a good year, because a lot of pitchers won't have quality starts. Number 3, stat to avoid. Wins and losses. Oh my fucking god. They don't matter. They really don't matter. Because here's the thing. If you pitch for a team with a good offense, you will get a lot of wins. It doesn't make you a good hit. It doesn't make you a good pitcher. If you pitch for a team that has a bad offense, you'll get a lot of losses. Doesn't make you a bad pitcher. Let's look at somebody who pitched quite well for a long time, but didn't have very good run support on his teams. Let's talk about Mike Messina. Let's talk about Moose. Mike Messina is one of the best pitchers of his era. But because he played on teams that didn't have very good offenses, he didn't get as many wins as you might expect. Is the 2000 version of Mike Messina worse than the 1999 version? He's actually better, but he lost more games. Why? We'd have to do a pretty deep dive, but I suspect the answer is the Orioles didn't give as much offense that year. He only got 20 games once his entire career, which is the last year in the major league, which is kind of good timing. But he was arguably worse that year than the year he won 11. They just don't matter. And especially because pitchers don't go as deep in games as they used to, they don't always even get wins when they should. I mean, Mike Mussina was pitching in 2008. Now let's look at somebody a bit more recent. Let's talk about Justin Verlander. Is not a great example because he's kind of a throwback, but it's still worth examining his statistical record here. Why am I looking at his hitting? Please give me his pitching. Thank you. Yeah, here you go. Yeah, Justin Verlander lost 17 games in 2008. That's a pretty bad season, right? He was basically the same pitcher as he was in 2014 when he won 15 games. What happened? The Tigers were pretty bad in those years. They were not a great franchise. They didn't give him a lot of run support. And so he looks worse than he actually is. 2.4 WAR is pretty good for a pitcher. So yeah, he actually had a pretty good season. Both years. He just was a little bit more unlucky. 2008. So wins and losses, they don't matter. Not anymore. Back in the day, when pitchers could go deeper into games, they got more wins. If you're throwing shutouts every start, you're going to get a lot of wins. That makes you a great pitcher. Pitchers don't throw shutouts anymore. So, wins and losses. After Justin Verlander, and Justin Verlander has said publicly he wants to get to 300 wins because it's always been a Hall of Fame benchmark. I don't think he's got very much chance of doing it, but hats off to him. Look at somebody who's considered roughly his skill with the pitch, his contemporary Jacob deGrom. Gets hurt a lot. An important fact there. He's won more than 10 games 3 times in his career. Does it mean that Jacob deGrom is a terrible pitcher and Justin Verlander is a future Hall of Famer? No. I think they're both Hall of Famers. Just in very different ways. In very different ways. I hope that Max Scherzer can have a great year, or Jacob deGrom can have a pretty good year with the Rangers. If he can get back to what he was when he was one of the most dominating pitchers in the league, I think he's got a great chance to make the Hall of Fame. But all this is to say, wins and losses aren't that important because you can get up a lot of wins if you pitch for good teams, and you yourself are not a great pitcher. Hi, Jack Morris. Yeah. Picture these loaded Tigers lineups, and you're going to get a lot of wins too. He's not that good a pitcher. He shouldn't even be in the Hall of Fame, in my opinion. He is because the veterans voted him in. But he's a part of people like, oh, pitchers are weak today. They don't know how to throw, and that's why they don't throw as many innings as they used to. No, it was a different game. It's a different game. Anyways, look, are you going to sit there and tell me that Jack Morris is better than Pedro Martinez because Pedro Martinez has fewer wins? Get the fuck out of here. Miss you with that bullshit. Pedro Martinez is one of the best people to ever pick up a baseball in history. Jack Morris was pretty good for a long time. Not even in the same zip code, in my opinion. But hey, only 219 wins. I guess he sucks. Miss you that bullshit. Don't even try to sell that one to me, dude. I don't think so, man. I don't think so. I love this. 1996, 13 and 10, 5.3 WAR. 2001, 5.7 WAR, 7 and 3. Does it make him a bad pitcher? No. To get that much WAR out of that few innings is pretty insane. Like, this is a fantastic season. Truly amazing. Okay. So wins and losses, get out of here. Nobody cares. Holds. Holds are such a silly stat, I don't even remember how to calculate them. I had to look them up. A hold is what happens when a relief pitcher enters the game in a safe situation, gets one out, and when he leaves, the lead is still there. Okay. Let's talk about a scenario here. You are a right-handed pitcher. Bases are loaded. You come up and you take them out. Sorry, better example. Sorry, much better example. Bases are empty. Nobody out. You walk onto the mound, and you walk 3 batters in a row. Bases are loaded. You're having a bad day. The next hitter gets a lazy pop fly. Out. You leave the game. Did that pitcher do his job? He did not do his job. That is a bad pitcher that made bad decisions. And just because he got an out, he gets credited with a hold. As long as the score is close enough. That's silly. It's a silly stat. Nobody thinks of holds as being useful at all, but it's an attempt to fix a different stat, which is much worse. Which we'll get to in a second, but holds, meh. Nobody cares about them. They're a junk stat made up to make guys who took the ball in the 7th inning and only pitched the 7th inning feel better about themselves. There's better ways to evaluate reliever performance than holds. But they're not as bad as saves. Oh my gosh. Saves are a stat that wasn't even tracked for most of baseball history because relievers weren't a thing. Not a real thing. There was a time in baseball history where if you were considered a reliever, you were very sparingly used, and you were basically considered to be not a very good pitcher. The starting pitcher only pitched 8 2/3 innings, and he got a hangnail. Somebody's got to go up there and throw a few pitches. Get in there, buddy. And then that would be it. Relievers today are very, very different. The game is built around relievers for a number of reasons that we'll get into a little bit later. You're probably sick of me hearing saying we'll get to it later. We will. I promise. Cross my heart and hope to die. But to measure the impact of relievers at the end of games, aka closers, they invented a statistic called the save. Saves are... I don't even know how to describe them in a way that doesn't make them sound stupid, because they are stupid. I want to see who invented this, because I don't remember. 1952, I guess, it was invented back in 52. What is a save? Jerome Holtzman, that's the guy I'm thinking of, the guy who invented saves. You get a save if you do one of two things. One, you enter the game, your team is leading by 3 or fewer runs, and you pitch the inning and finish the game. So I had to pitch 1 inning. Theoretically. There's other stuff in there too. If you enter the game with a time running the on-deck circle, you also get a save. But for the most part, it's guy comes in the 9th inning, the score is 3 runs or less. You step in there, get the job done, you get a save. Congratulations. You did it. You had a good game. Or did you? See, there's an additional kind of save that I really love, but let's stick with this one to begin with, right? You get a save if you come in, okay, your team is up by 3 runs or less. You come into the game, you finish it out, you get your save. Amazing. What if you're the away pitcher? So you pitch in the top of the 9th. The game is, say, 2-1, and you strike out the side. Great job. Then the other team, then your home team. Well, okay, terrible example. Sorry, I'm having brain rot. Bear with me for a second. Um, what this means is you can come into the game down up 3-0 and give up 2 home runs right away and still get a save. Did you have a good night? No. You gave up 2 home runs. That's bad. But you still get a save, which therefore convinces people you're worth more money, and you get accolades and fame and everything. That's a bad save, right? Like, you didn't do your job, but you still got credit for it. But then there's the really bad save, and this one I love. If you come into a game and you pitch the final 3 innings and you win the game, you get you get a save. Let me repeat that again. It doesn't matter how big a lead you have. If you enter the game and you pitch 3 straight innings, you get a save, as long as your team wins. If, let's say, you're winning 20-0, you're having an easy game. You take a journeyman pitcher who hasn't pitched in a couple of days and you say, hey, buddy, take the ball, close out the game. He gives up 5 runs in each of the last 3 innings. He's given up 15 runs. You win the game 20-15. He just got a save for that. He pitched like absolute fucking dog water and gets credit for something that could make him more money down the line. Saves are so stupid. They're so stupid. And yes, the great relievers get a lot of saves because they pitch in those kinds of situations because they're trusted to and they excel. But the save as an individual statistic is dumb. Best and most clear example of why saves are stupid. Let's look at the all-time save leaderboard, right? Who has the most saves in Major League history? It is Mariano Rivera. Easily the best relief pitcher in Major League history, no dispute there. Trevor Hoffman, Hall of Famer, pretty good. Lee Smith, Lee Smith is an okay pitcher. I'm not saying that he's a bad pitcher. He's not in the same league as Trevor Hoffman or especially Mariano Rivera. Oh, Billy Wagner's only got 422 saves. He must suck, right? Nope, he's a Hall of Famer too. And a good Hall of Famer. Francisco Rodriguez has 437 saves. Is he a Hall of Famer? The man didn't even get more than 10% of the vote more than one time. So clearly we don't think of saves as the end-all be-all, and yet so many people get 30 saves one time and end up in the Hall and end up getting lots and lots of money, even when they're not very good pitchers. Yeah. Stupid stat. Don't like it. Doesn't make any sense to me. Don't waste your time with saves. Yeah. Okay. Let's get to the good stuff. Get to the really good stuff. I want to talk about relievers first. Relievers are so volatile from year to year, it's very difficult to determine if they had a good year or not. And the traditional stats for pitchers don't work for relievers because they don't pitch as many innings. Which means things like they're not going to get very many wins. Emmanuel Clase had a fantastic season last year. Only got 4 wins, must have sucked, right? Well, I don't think so. I think it was pretty awesome. For lots of other reasons. So how can we quantify pitchers' contributions knowing full well that they don't pitch as many innings and therefore they're at an unfair disadvantage in some of the more traditional numbers? Let's take a better example than Emmanuel Clase. Let's talk about Cade Smith instead. I would like your... No, it is... Where is it? Time frame. Last year. Here we go. Let's talk about Cade Smith. Cade Smith had a pretty good year. But his ERA wasn't as low as other people in the league. He looks a lot less valuable in terms of WAR than somebody like, say, Tanner Bibby, even though Kate Smith was as valuable in a lot of ways. Because he didn't pitch as many innings, the game doesn't, or baseball doesn't know how to treat that. Baseball doesn't know how to pay attention to that. Also, again, he says clearly a terrible pitcher. No, it's because Emmanuel Clase was their main closer. Paul Sewell got 16 saves last year. When the fuck did that happen? Oh, right. He's a free agent that we acquired. Okay, that makes sense. I didn't recognize his name. I was like, who the fuck is that guy? Taking saves away from Class A. Anyways, Cates had a great season. And let's talk about 3 stats that help us establish that he did have a great season, independent of the stuff that a starter would care about the most. The first of those stats is called WPA, win probability added. When this pitcher comes into a game, he increases the likelihood that they will win. WPA is typically scored on an individual season, is scored more in a game, a blah 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 blah. It is more on a game-to-game basis than on a season-wide thing. If we look at somebody who has a bit more of a track record, let's look at Class A. Maybe we have some WPA from. We don't have it. Well, that's poopy. What this means is there's this big fancy thing called win probability, which is when an event happens in a game, does it increase your chances of winning the game, or does it decrease your chances of winning the game? So WPA is win probability added. It tells you how much more likely your team was to win the game when they came into the game. It's usually a percentage. Like 3% is really good. Like 3% is really, really good. It means the team's more likely to win just because you took the ball. That's the number 3 stat. The number 2 really helpful stat for pitchers, and again, I apologize that this isn't something they track from year to year, so it's just not in the game, is PLI, which is average leverage. Let me very quickly load up our White Sox save, because I actually have numbers for that one, which means I can put these stats into context for you. Although it's all going to look bad for my people, so yeah. We'll take a moment to let the game load, and then we'll look at it in the White Sox. It will actually will be numbers that are recorded, and it'll be a little bit more meaningful. Let's look at a guy like Caleb Ferguson here. Okay, his WPA last year was 0.6. That means when he took the mound, teams are 0.6% more likely to win the game. That doesn't sound like a lot, but let me show you how it's actually might make a really big deal. We're going to look at a box score from last season. Let me look at the team schedule. August. Let's pick a win, right? This is the win probability graph. When the event spikes white, something good happened for the for in this case the White Sox. It spikes red, it's towards the red side, it's something good happened for them. So it starts dead even. An event that adds a lot of win probability is something that would cause a pretty big spike. Like here, a 2-run single against Class A by password Justinson Garcia. So this is how WPA works. So if you increase the percentage chance of winning the game, you get credit for that. Notice at the very end here, it took a little bit of a dip toward the Guardians. I wouldn't worry about it because it actually tracks like each and every inning. So notice how it went up ever so slightly. It's just because they pitched well at the end there. They didn't score any runs or anything, so it didn't really change the matter very much. It looks like it actually helped the White Sox. That's why it's pushing more to the White Sox side. So whatever they did in the last inning, in the 10th inning, oh yeah, they literally he struck out the side. So there you go. So they had negative win probability. So a pitcher that has a positive win probability is what makes it more likely to win the game over the course of an entire season. That's win probability. By contrast, pitcher leverage index is something that tells you how a pitcher is used, not how he performs. Let's take a look at that. PLI, or pitcher leverage index, is how important how close is the game when you enter it? For example, between an average or neutral is 1. So basically, if your leverage is an index of 1, you're coming in you're just coming in and just like, you're just there. You're just a guy. You're trusted, but not really closely trusted. You're coming in a normal situation. So a guy like a Hyro Iriarte didn't really come in big situations. He's also a starter, which is maybe a little bit less important. If you have, and a lot of these guys didn't pitch for me last season, which doesn't help. A lot of these guys are new. Let's pick a team that maybe didn't suck as much. Let's pick the Orioles, who just won the World Series. I bet we'll have a lot more meaningful numbers here. Yeah. So Chris Bubik was just a guy. No, he's a starter. Bad choice. Bad example. Cole Sands, here's a guy. Cole Sands is generally brought into the game when it wasn't very important. That's what leverage index is telling us. His team was ahead by quite a bit. The situation wasn't very difficult. They didn't really trust him when they really needed an out. They just brought him in every once in a great while. By contrast, let's look at somebody like Brian Abreu, who has a 1.77. They constantly brought him in important situations, and he fucked up. We know that from other stats. But leverage tells you how often is this person coming into the game when the game is on the line. And if the person with the highest leverage score is also pitching very poorly, that's something you need to consider. You need to change usage patterns. You need to do something different. You don't want a guy that's got a leverage index that's this high pitching meaningful innings, especially if he's pitching poorly. Although maybe he wasn't pitching as poorly as his ERA would suggest, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Actually, no. Who was I looking at that had like the 5-year? I was looking at Michael Kelly, who was brought in pretty low leverage situations. That makes sense. Not a correlation. You could be like Matt Brash, who was given important assignments from time to time and didn't do very well with them. He was a setup man, but he didn't pitch nearly as well as other people with more leverage. Brian Abreu was a much better pitcher than he was. Felix Bautista, the closer, makes sense, right? Was he a great pitcher? He's pretty good. Pretty good. Pretty good. So pitcher leverage index, PLI, very handy statistic. It tells you when the guy came in, how important was the game, how close was it. For relievers, the stat that I really, really like for them, it really tells you how good a pitcher is IRS. I know, no likes IRS. Boo, boo, boo. IRS percentage is inherited runs scored, which means if I bring this guy into the game, how often is he giving up runs? He wants to be as low as possible. So quickly, this would indicate to us that maybe Chase McDermott was kind of bad last year. A third of the time he took the mound, people on base scored. That's pretty bad. That's not good. Compare somebody like Felix Bautista, only 25%. Or somebody like Matt Brash, 16.7%. Matt Brash had a pretty good year last year. It just doesn't show up in some of the more traditional stats. That's really good. When he came into the game with runners on base, he didn't let them score, which is literally your job as a reliever. Now, of course, if you come into the game and give up a home run immediately and then leave the game, your IRS percentage is 0 because you didn't give up any inherited runs, as long as nobody was on base. But very important, very underrated stat is IRS percentage, the percentage of inherited base runners that scored when your pitcher pitched the ball. Okay, that's relievers. There's other ways to judge relievers as well, but I want to get into starters because a lot of the stats are going to be the same. It's just those last 3 are reliever specific, and they tell you a lot about a pitcher's season. So please keep those in mind when you're evaluating your pitchers. Let's talk about starters. You're going to get 12 starter statistics. Starting with one they have no control over, but which is so important to get the appropriate amount of context, RSG. What in the absolute fuck is RSG? RSG is run support per game. This is how many runs your team scores when you are on the mound. When Tomoyuki Sugano was on the mound, the Baltimore Orioles scored 2.8 runs. Divided by 9 innings too. Sorry about that. It's divided by 9. So on average, 2.8 runs per start. It's divided by the number of starts. Sorry, it's the total number of runs you allowed divided by the number of starts. So in this case, take 54 divided by 22, you get 2.5. Wrong guy. Sorry. Same thing though. 94 divided by 33, you get 2.8. So this is telling you how often are they scoring when you're on the mound. This has nothing to do with whether Tomoyuki Sugano was a good pitcher, but it means that his team was more likely to score a run when he was on the mound, and therefore we might expect to have more wins. Look at Sonny Gray. He got significantly worse run support. Was he a better pitcher than Sugano? Sugano was a better pitcher. But we have context now. We might understand why somebody has low win totals. That has nothing to do with his ability to pitch. Let's go back to the Guardians series, because I think this one gives a little bit better look at historical data. We'll take a look at some pretty famous seasons. I don't know whether OOTP tracks historical run support per game. Maybe not, but we can at least look, right? Who's a pitcher who got a lot of wins? Look at Jose Lima. There's that 1 year Jose Lima got like a shocking number of wins. Yeah, 16, not 16 losses. Here it is, 21 wins. Was a pretty good pitcher that year. How often were they scoring runs for him, though? Is that in here? Probably not. I might be asking for a fool's errand here. It might be under opponent batting stats. It's not even covered here. That's lame. Yeah, it doesn't include historical run support numbers. I kind of figured that. But yes, so it's an important clue as to whether a pitcher is getting the benefit of his team scoring runs when he happens to be on the mound, and therefore getting more wins and losses. So, a handy thing to know, even if it doesn't tell you how good the pitcher is pitching, it helps you put wins, admittedly a bad statistic, into a lot more valuable context. That's RSG, run support per game. The next one is something that is important to know, but maybe isn't as important as some of the others, which is PPG, pitches per game. This goes for every pitcher. This tells you the total number of pitches that they threw divided by the number of games that they pitched in, and how many pitches did they throw every time they took the mound. So Cade Smith, 15 pitches per game, roughly speaking. He came in 74 games, which tells us he didn't have to throw very many pitches. He's a reliever, we expect that. If somebody's going deep into games, but not throwing very many pitches per game, it means they're extraordinarily efficient, and they're a very, very good pitcher. Tristan McKenzie didn't throw very many pitches, but he also didn't start very often either. So that's why it's important to always consider this in context. Now, there's some things to consider when you think about pitches per game. First of all, strikeout pitchers throw more pitches. It's just the way that math works. Let's look at a guy like Jamie Moyer. Jamie Moyer quite famously rarely struck people out, and I bet we're going to see some pretty great pitches per game numbers from him. Historically, let's see, PPG. Maybe opponent batting stats here? No, I mean, I can edit things. I can edit to show what I want it to show. Edit stat row. Can I get PPG? Oh, it is in there. Okay. It's expanded pitching stats 1. Okay. Where is it? Here he is. Yeah. In his career, he threw about 90 pitches a start. And that's really good. Let's talk about Nolan Ryan, one of the best strikeout pitchers in history. I bet his PPG is going to be a lot higher. Yeah, almost 10 more pitches a game. But it gets even higher. Like, look at this year. 130 pitches per game. He is striking a lot of people out. We know that. But he's also just getting hit, which is a big problem with Nolan Ryan. One of the best pitchers of all time. Clear inner circle Hall of Famer. I'm not disputing that for a second. But he did get hit a lot. He did have lots of other problems. That means he wasn't the flawless pitcher people would assume him to be. A guy like Christy Mathewson, on the other hand, I don't know if we're going to have statistical numbers for him, but let's take a look. How many pitches is he throwing per game? Quite a few. And he was also a strikeout pitcher, so that makes sense to me. It's an important stat to know. It tells you people are being overpitched. Let's look at a very famous example of a pitcher whose arm blew out before his time, Mark Pryor. 109 pitches per game for a 23-year-old is really bad. It is a bad decision to have somebody throw that many pitches. His contemporary, Kerry Wood, I bet he's going to have some pretty high pitch per game numbers. Yeah, this is dumb. This is what dumb teams do. They take young pitchers and they just basically blow their arms off. Notice this direct correlation between the number of innings decreasing, and now he's injured all the time and can't even start games anymore. Why? He threw way too many pitches per game. That's a big problem. You want them to be far more efficient than that. It doesn't mean somebody's pitching well, though. Like, you can have somebody who, every single time he shows up in the game, he throws a pitch, goes up a home run, and leaves the game. Never gets anybody out. He's going to have one pitch per game. Doesn't make him a good pitcher. Just means he maybe is kind of efficient. PPG is most important for measuring injuries and telling whether somebody's actually durable. If somebody can develop pretty consistent pitch per game numbers, it means they've got a pretty good arm, and you can give them a bit more consideration. Okay. Let's talk about one of the granddaddy pitching statistics, ERA. Earned run average. You take the number of earned runs a pitcher has scored, and you divide it by the number of, I believe it's the number of innings that they pitched. It's such an old pitch, it's such an old stat, I need to look it up. But I'm pretty sure it's earned runs over innings pitched. Formula for ERA. Yep. Oh, it's also times 9. Okay, that makes sense. It's earned runs divided by innings pitched times 9. To basically put it in a scale that makes sense to you. So what this is telling me is, on average, Kerry Wood in 1999 was allowing 3.4 runs per game. Pretty much. So why is it only number 10? This is a pretty good stat, right? Like, if someone has a high ERA, they're a bad pitcher. If someone has a low ERA, they're a good pitcher. Well, there's more to it than that. It is possible to have a high ERA through no fault of the pitcher's own. It's possible to have a low ERA through no fault of the pitcher's own. I can't think of a good example. You'll have to forgive me for this. Maybe you can think of one. You can share it with people in the comments. If you play for a really great defense, your ERA is going to be lower, even if you're not pitching better, because they're catching balls that other people wouldn't. They're also less likely to make an error. But errors actually help you. If I give up, so let's talk about a scenario here. I am the pitcher. Bases are loaded, I just came into the game, and the first thing I do is I throw a passed ball. Not a wild pitch, a passed ball. This counts as an error on the catcher. That runner scores. I give up a run, but I didn't give up an earned run. Maybe that's fine. Okay, fine. The next guy hits the ball, really weak dribbler. Pitcher runs up forward, grabs the ball off the ground, flings it to first base, throws it into the dugout. It's a 2-base error, 2 runs scored, neither which count against a pitcher, but it was the pitcher's fault. The pitcher made the bad defensive play. He should get punished for that. Also, another example. Let's say a ball is hit on a frozen rope, as hard as possible. A guy dives, ticks off his glove into the outfield. Somebody scores on the play. Is that an earned run? I don't know. It depends on the official score. If the official score is like you know what? He did a phenomenal job even getting to that ball. Great job, no error. Somebody else is going to be having a bad day or judge the player differently and say, you know what? This is Ozzie Smith. He gets to those plays every single time. That he didn't do it this time means he's not having a good day. That's an error. Errors are subjective. They're decided by a human being who decides if somebody should have caught the ball, if things had been different. If the out should have happened if things had been different. It requires you to engage in counterfactuals and hypothetical situations. That's generally a bad basis for a statistic. Don't put too much into ERA. Although, generally speaking, someone who has the high ERA is pitching poorly, someone with low ERA is pitching well. So to that end, it's a good thing. But not all pitchers who get a 3.40 ERA are created equally, as we'll see looking at some of the other statistics. But it's a nice back-the-envelope stat. It's a classic for a reason. But there's other stats that are better. One such stat is WHIP. If you are a fantasy baseball player, you know WHIP quite well. WHIP is walks plus hits over innings pitched. It is basically how much are they allowing base runners. It's not perfect. WHIP doesn't include things like hit batsmen, I don't think. Does it? Okay. Yeah, it doesn't include hit batsmen. It's just total walks plus total hits divided by innings pitched. Giants taking the closer you are to 1, the better you are. If you're over 1, if you're like 2 or higher, you've had a really bad season. WHIP is a fun stat, and there's some correlation from season to season, but it's really used mostly by fantasy baseball players. It's not really something I think most teams look at seriously to evaluate. Is this a good pitcher? Is this a bad pitcher? There's just better ways to do it that are far more valuable, in my opinion. It's also a rate stat, which means if you throw a lot of innings, your WHIP's going to go up, unless you're also a fantastic pitcher. Let's think of somebody who threw a lot of innings in the recent past. Let's talk about Steve Carlton. Steve Carlton was known for throwing lots and lots of innings. Inner Circle Hall of Fame, one of the best of all time. Yeah. His WHIPs are normally pretty good. Does this mean that he had a bad year in 1973? Maybe a bad year for him. But notice his WHIPs tend to be somewhat high. Like, sometimes because he's a bad pitcher, sometimes just because he didn't throw very many innings. Or threw too many innings, so. You know. It's good. It doesn't really tell us anything that useful. I still like it better than ERA, though, because it's a more complete picture, and it's not subjective. It's very objective. A really good indicator for pitcher success, although not for all pitchers, is GO percentage or ground out percentage. What percentage of outs did they get that were on the ground? Now, if you stop to think about it, it's not always listed, by the way, historically. We're going to have to look at more recent stats, probably, to see ground out percentage. Let's look at, say, Tanner Bibby. Do we have some stats for him, maybe? We don't. It's usually something that's measured in the season, so let's load up the White Sox save again, and we'll look at them. I'm going to say the White Sox save for the rest of the time. I just think because certain stats are just not tracked for pitchers automatically. If you're looking at historical data, I think it's more useful to us to take a look at more recent pitchers. Let's look at Kyle Wright. He's got a nice long career. This is telling us he's allowing more fly balls than he's allowing ground balls. Why is this an important stat? First of all, there's pretty high correlation. Really good pitchers tend to have really good ground ball rates, except for the big strikeout guys. If you can keep the ball on the ground, you're much less likely to give up extra bases. You can't give up a home run on a ground ball. That's just science. Okay, that's not true. You could hit a ground ball in such a way that you could hit inside the park home run. Those happen like 5 times a year at most. Don't worry about it. But ground out percentage is so critical because it tells, is this pitcher keeping the ball on the ground? Pitchers that keep the ball on the ground are generally happy pitchers. They don't give up as many runs. Everybody likes it. We're all happy if we keep the ball on the ground. It's also a skill that pitchers carry in from year to year to year, regardless of their relievers, starters, whatever. Apart from very obvious hiccups with a very obvious cause, They don't fluctuate very much. Good ground ball pitchers are always good ground ball pitchers. Somebody who's more of a ground ball pitcher, maybe Noah Schultz is. Yeah, he's a ground ball guy. 51%. So it tells you, is this guy keeping the ball on the ground? And if so, what is he doing with it? Very, very important statistic. Much more useful to me than ERA, because I know that ERA can fluctuate pretty wildly, but ground out percentage doesn't. We talked about offensive statistics last video, and we talked about something called OPS, on base plus slugging, which is a good back envelope. Is this a good hitter? There's a flip side to that, which is called opponents on base plus slugging, or oops. I'm not even joking. It's actually what it's called. Well, they lamely listed here as just OPS. It's called oops. This tells you how did other teams hit against him when he was pitching. And in this case, you can clearly see he was doing a pretty good job. This is a pretty good number. Obviously, you want as low an oops as possible, but it is opponents on base plus slugging. So yeah, oops. But it's a really nice stat to tell you, hey, Kyle Wright struggled last year. How do I know that? The 745 OPS is actually a little bit high. What's going on with him? What happened? Why was he not as effective as he has been in years past? On the other hand, we could look at a really good pitcher. The White Sox don't have any of those. Who won the World Series last year? It was Baltimore, right? I'm sure they have at least one really good pitcher. Yeah, let's talk about Grayson Rodriguez here. What is his oops? Actually kind of high. I mean, 680 is below league average. It's not worth getting that excited about. But he was getting hit for some power, it looks like. Probably struggled to keep the ball down. If I take a look here, yep. Look at that. I had no idea what his ground out percentage was before I changed the page, but that makes sense to me. That puts it in context. As opponent slugging percentage is actually somewhat high, which means he's more likely to give up home runs, doubles, and extra bases all. And he gave up 22 home runs, so it checks out. It checks out. Also notice, the previous season, he only gave up 7 home runs, and so his oops was a lot lower. So, he had too many oops. You don't want oops. Oops are bad. I'm going to be honest with you, a big part of the reason why I like oops is because I like saying oops. It's fun. Let's stick with Grayson Rodriguez, and let's talk about one of the most useful stats for any pitcher, which is, I call them the per 9 family. All this is taking a concrete event and dividing it by 9. What a concept, right? But it's so useful. The really big ones you want to pay attention to are these last 3. Home runs per 9, walks per 9, strikeouts per 9. These are called a pitcher's peripherals. So they have no correlation to ERA. Like, you can have a high ERA and low in these numbers and vice versa. However, these are more consistent, and if these change drastically, means something either very good or something very bad has happened. Grayson Rodriguez is pretty consistent. Like most young pitchers, he struggles a bit with control, but he's going in the right direction, right? Like, he's controlling his pitches better and better each year, and he's becoming a better pitcher as a result. Home runs are still a problem. We want him to reduce those, but he's a really good pitcher. On the flip side, let's look at somebody that we know wasn't very good. Let's pick, I don't know, most of the White Sox, and look at what their great stats look like. Let's talk about a reliever. Oh, that's a great idea. Let's look at Kenley Jansen. Kenley Jansen had a pretty piss-poor year. He's also 39 years old. Who among us is all that great a pitcher at 39, right? Bad season. What happened? Why was he so much worse this year? Great stats really answer this question for us in a really effective way. Okay. Hi. Hi there. That's your culprit. His walks were down when he came to Chicago. Strikeouts about the same. But he gave up home runs at a really high rate, which is bad. Pitchers should not be giving up home runs. Historically, Kenley Jansen, being one of the better pitchers in the league, keeps the ball down. That's his job. Home runs are bad. Oh, but not last year. Now, so our real question is, why did he give up so many more home runs? And this is where you can really dig in deeply to a pitcher's profile and figure out what's changed. What has caused him to look as bad as he did? His added quite a bit of win probability for Toronto. Far less for me, but he didn't pitch for me all that long, so maybe that's reasonable. But look, as compared to even 1 year before that, he's probably just getting old, is probably the technical term. He's 39 years old. He's younger than I am, but I also don't have his fastball. I can't throw a baseball at 93 miles an hour. Also, an extreme fly ball hitter. When they start losing strikeouts, when they start losing velocity, they tend to unravel very quickly, which may be what's happening with him. Looking at a starter, let's not pick on Colorado. Let's pick on a young guy in Hagen Smith. What's his deal? What's his rate stat story telling us? The young pitcher's classic issue. He's walking people. Why do young pitchers tend to walk people? First of all, they don't know how to throw strikes, but also they don't want to get hit. And you're like, what a stupid thing to say, Avi. Of course they don't want to get hit. Why does that matter? It means they're going to nibble. They're not going to be willing to challenge hitters. They're not going to be willing to throw pitches that might be hittable. They're going to want to go just off the plate to try to get swinging strikes because that makes them look good. Well, that doesn't always work. That doesn't always work. And so we can tell he didn't have a very good season based on his peripherals. He walked too many hitters, gave up a few too many home runs, didn't strike out as much as we'd like. This is a very good K rate, though, for a starter. Starters being above 9 is actually quite good. It means they're actually striking a lot of people out. You don't have to strike a lot of people out to be a good pitcher, but it really helps. Yeah. Noah Schultz, much better pitcher. He just didn't walk people. Walks are bad. Don't do them, kids. Don't walk people. I don't love BRA per 9. I don't love BRA per 9 because it's about it's what is it? What's the actual name for it? It's something runs allowed. It's runners allowed per 9 innings. Yeah. Oh, base runners allowed per 9 innings. That's actually kind of helpful. That's actually kind of nice to know. How often are they allowing base runners? Because they're allowing a lot of base runners, it means they're probably not pitching that well. But it's only really tracked all that well for starters. And we expect to be lower for relievers. But rate stats are really, really good. Because pitchers don't have a consistent workload from year to year, unless they're really, really great or really, really bad, rate stats are usually more useful than just raw numbers. 208 strikeouts is good, right? That is a good thing for someone to have done. We'll see a good pitcher. He was fine, I guess. Let's build on the rate stats for something else that's really, really helpful. Strikeout to walk ratio. Very simple. Number of strikeouts divided by number of walks. Want this number to be as high as possible. It doesn't matter how you get there, though. And that's one of the things I love about strikeout to walk ratio. It cares about process more than it cares about how you get there. If you strike out 3 batters and allow 1 walk, you have a strikeout to walk ratio of 3-1. If you strike out 300 batters and walk 100, that's also 3-1. If you average, I'm trying to think of an example that's really like noticeable, but low walks are just as good as high strikeouts. I think that's the big takeaway here. Compare Sean Burke to Kenley Jansen. Who is the better pitcher? By strikeout to walk ratio, it was Jansen. And I think the numbers back that up. He actually had a pretty decent ERA that year. Didn't allow as many home runs per 9, but this is just his time with this is his time combined with both teams. Just for the White Sox, he actually had kind of a rough year. So, yeah. Really good. I really like strikeout to walk ratio because it's just a really solid way to get a sense of any pitcher, no matter how they get their outs. It tells you, are they walking those people when they strike out? That's what matters more than anything. 100 strikeouts and 50 walks is just as good as 300 strikeouts and 150 walks. Maybe even better in certain circumstances. It just depends on the pitcher. Okay. We're going to have a moment here. And I think this is the critical moment. It's something I've been dancing around most of this video. And now I'm finally going to tear the band-aid off and explain why pitchers today are better than they've ever been and yet look like they have worse stats than they ever have. It is one stat that is changing that. Such an important stat, it's completely objective, but without understanding why this number has changed, you will never understand why pitchers today are athletically superior to a lot of the past pitchers, but look worse statistically. IP innings pitched. The pitchers of today, especially starters, pitch less innings than they ever have before in the history of Major League Baseball. If you listen to older baseball fans or people who aren't very in the know, they're going to say stupid things like, oh, because pitchers today are soft. They're mollycoddled. Back in my day, pitchers threw 300 innings and they were completely fine. Well, it was easier to pitch back then. Is Christy Mathewson being able to throw 300 plus innings in a season is because most of the pitchers, the hitters he is facing, are not capable of hitting anything more than singles and doubles. If every hitter in a lineup is a home run threat, you have to pitch more carefully. If you throw harder, you will throw fewer innings because your arm gets tired faster. That's physics. That's how baseball, that's how human beings work. It sucks, but it's part of baseball. Whilst our innings pitched lower, people are a lot more careful about pitch counts, which is a good thing. Pitchers still get hurt, they still get their careers ruined, but it's not because of silly practices back in the day of having somebody throw ridiculous numbers of pitches over and over and over until their arm basically falls off. Fewer pitches is fewer innings pitched. Teams are also smarter. They can figure out quite quickly when a pitcher is getting worse, and they can pull him out and put in a reliever. You may have heard that recent approaches suggest pitchers are only really good two times through the order, and they get worse after the third time. Back in the day, you would just make him pitch through it. And because the stakes were lower, it was less likely somebody would say hit a great big home run. You didn't mind as much. If pitching longer to games and you give a couple extra singles, fine. If it was a couple extra home runs, that cost you the game. That's a very big difference in how pitchers are treated. So, we cannot consider innings pitched totals to be the same now as they were in the past. It's just not apples to oranges. Benny Martinez has 183 innings pitched. That's really good. If we look at his, it's under scouting, isn't it? No, it's under... Where's one that has, like, it's history, isn't it? Yeah, here you go. He didn't crack the top 10 for innings pitched, which doesn't surprise me. But 183 innings. That's pretty decent. A pitcher like him back in the past would not be throwing that many. Would be throwing way more innings than that. If we look at the league's history, if we look at 2025, go away. There you go. We had a very small handful of pitchers pitched 200 innings, which is actually pretty good. Trick Scubo leading with 219. The average innings pitched, though, is a lot lower than it was back in the day. Let's look at 2005 instead. When the Chicago White Sox, ironically enough, won the World Series. I remember that year. How many pitches through 200 innings then? A lot. A lot of them. Like, we're not even halfway down the list, and we're already saying that the pitchers are pitching you 10 to 20 innings more. That's just 20 years ago. Let's go 20 more back. Let's look at 1985. So 40 years ago. 1985 with the world champion Kansas City Royals. Bert Blyleven almost gives us 300 innings. Is it because Burt Blevin is that much better than, say, who's the big guy this year? Who was number one on the list? I don't remember anymore. Does it mean Burt Blevin is a better pitcher of all time than, say, somebody like, um, what did I do? Did I go too far? I went too far. No, I didn't. I'm looking at the wrong page. Sorry. All right. So Tariq Skubal had a fantastic season. He led the league in WAR for pitchers, and he won the Cy Young Award. Sorry, that was the year before. IRL, but a fantastic season. Better than his Cy Young season. But he didn't throw as many innings as Burt Blyleven. Does it mean he's a worse pitcher than Burt Blyleven? Of course it doesn't mean that. You have to be very silly to think that it means he's absolutely a worse pitcher than Burt Blyleven. So you have to consider inning totals within the era in which they are considered. Burt Blyleven was also a very good pitcher that year. Like, I don't mean to begrudge him his pitching skills. He didn't win a Cy Young, but that's because people were stupid back then. It's because he pitched on bad teams. Minnesota and Cleveland in 1885 were not very good teams. But anyways, so innings pitched are a very, very important statistic. You want pitchers to throw more innings than less. But the distribution of innings is very different. It's far more to relievers than it ever was in the past. And the quality of innings matters a lot more. So innings pitched is a very meaningful stat. You want pitchers that can pitch a lot of innings. But you may have to adjust your idea of what a lot of innings counts as. Also, because pitchers throw harder, they get injured more frequently. It's just life. Jacob deGrom has a very low innings pitch total over his career. Does it make him a bad pitcher? No. He's actually a very, very good pitcher that can't stay healthy. Now, the flip side of that is, okay, but isn't staying healthy an important part of his job? 100%. I don't disagree with you in the slightest. But you can't call him a bad pitcher because he's having trouble staying healthy. It doesn't mean he's not pitching effectively. It means he can't stay healthy. Two different things. Two very different things. But I will take a season like his 2018 any day of the week, and twice on Sunday. And even though he threw like 80 less innings than Burt Blyleven, he's still a better pitcher than Burt Blyleven was that year. So knowing how your innings are distributed is more important than how many innings any one player gets, because that'll tell you where you need to make some adjustments and where you need to make some important decisions. Okay. Top 3. The first one, if you're a fan of point-and-click adventure games, is Sierra. Not the video game company, but the statistic. Sierra is a wiggly statistic, and you're about to say, what the fuck? Sierra is a wiggly statistic because it ignores part of the new statistics. But it isn't only looking at 3 true outcomes. It's trying to bring hits in as well. They're trying. So why is Sierra a good statistic? It tells you how good a pitcher is with a little more complexity in a way that regular ERA doesn't. You will see very, very frequently that pitchers' ERAs and Sierras don't match up. And when they don't match up, you know there's something else going on there. Let me quickly set Sierra and ERA next to each other, make it really easy. I'm going to cheat and grab another one that we're going to talk about here in a minute. But just for right now, we can talk about this. So, okay. By ERA, Hagen Smith looks like a bad pitcher. Sierra, on the other hand, says he did a pretty good job. So what probably happened? Why does Sierra look so much worse? He suffered from a bad defense. Hagen Smith is probably a ground ball pitcher, would be my guess. He shades fly ball a little bit. It's not drastic, but And he's good at limiting hits, it seems, because the Sierra is actually a lot more reasonable. And that's true. His hits were not actually really, really low. What hurt him was walking people. Sierra is... What's the word that I'm looking for here? Sierra's a little bit kinder to walks than other things are. If you have a pitcher that doesn't a lot of hits but does a lot of walks, Sierra's going to like him a little bit more. That's just the nature of the beast. It gives a lot more credit for strikeouts, and it tends to credit people a little bit more for like balls in play. It's super duper complex. I don't pretend to understand everything, but this really helped us understand that it is better than ERA, and it's a more useful thing. Purely by ERA, we would think Hagen-Smith is a terrible pitcher that deserves to be consigned to the dustbin of history. Sirtel is actually pretty decent. Not brilliant, but decent. And it gives us hope for the future. That's Sierra. A better version of ERA. A more accurate version of ERA. Caleb Ferguson has a higher Sierra than ERA. Why did that happen? Well, although he pitched a fair bit last year, he pitched for two different teams and had wildly different statistics between them. He struggled a lot when he came to the White Sox. He allowed more home runs, which are bad, more walks, but he also got more strikeouts. So, yeah. Number 2 stat about time is FIP. I don't like wishy-washy stuff. I like Sierra. It is better than ERA. It is more useful than ERA. It's more predictive. It's better than ERA. FIP is better. All FIP rates are things that the pitcher can control. Home runs, walks, hit by pitch, and strikeouts. Divided by innings. That is FIP. There's also a constant, which you don't need to worry about. All it does is try to bring you to an ERA scale so the number makes sense in the context of ERA. If somebody has a significantly lower FIP than ERA, chances are they're probably a ground ball pitcher and they're victimized by bad defense or just bad luck. So here, Hagen-Smith doesn't benefit quite as much. It's not taking into account his ability to prevent hits, which seems to be unusually good. It says, yeah, he looks bad, but actually his peripherals give us some level of hope. Not a lot of hope, but some level of hope. There's more to this story. With a better defense, he probably would have had a better year. And the stats are going to look at that across the board for most of our pitchers. Bernie Martinez has actually helped more by his defense than we would normally expect. Because he's not very good at preventing hits. But he got really, really good on his 3 true outcomes. He struggled on his 3 true outcomes, so he looks a little bit worse with FIP. Because he has a lot of home runs, and that isn't like that. Because innings pitched are involved, as they are for Sierra, if somebody doesn't pitch very many innings, it's easier for them to get a lower FIP. Or lower Sierra. Sierra, like Angel Chavili, who pitched 15 innings. So, by the way, in case you don't know, innings pitched is always 0.1, 0.2, or 0 for a third of an inning, 2/3 of an inning, or a full inning. So, the more you know. FIP is a great way to look independent of fielding how good a pitcher was, and that'll tell you in a neutral environment what you would expect him to play as. If you see a big difference between FIP and ERA for a lot of your different pitchers, this really tells you I need to invest in defense. I already knew that. If you watched Friday's video, you know that too. But this really drives it home. This is why I really like FIP as a stat. But it's not my favorite pitching stat. It's WAR. It's just WAR. I'm sorry. WAR is the ideal pitching stat because it incorporates everything that a pitcher has to do. It's a counting stat, which means unlike Sierra and FIP, it's not a rate stat. So the more somebody pitches, the higher WAR they will have. It doesn't mean they're a better pitcher. It means their WAR is higher. So for instance here, a guy like Bernie Martinez has a little bit lower WAR than Kyle Wright, who pitched fewer innings. Who's a better pitcher? Kyle Wright. He got more value in less innings. That makes him a better pitcher. Don't worry about the difference between war and our war. Regular war is a little bit better. Our war is based solely on what's the difference in calculation? It's based on RA9 wins above replacement. Let me quickly RA9, which I think is what I'm trying to remind myself of where it comes from here. Oh, he uses runs allowed instead of FIP. Yeah. So it's more traditional. So basically, if somebody has a really good ERA, they're going to have a higher R WAR, even if they're actually not a better pitcher. Whereas WAR is a little bit closer to focusing on things that are FIP. So if pitchers give lots of hits, but also give up lots of strikeouts, lots of very few walks, and very few home runs, they're going to have a really great WAR, even if R WAR is going to drag them down a bit. People can even look negative by R WAR. Because their best skill is usually something like they're really bad at preventing hits. And preventing hits isn't the job of a pitcher. Preventing runs is the job of a pitcher. And hits usually aren't the pitcher's fault. So doesn't make Jared Rosario a good pitcher, but it makes him less transcendently terrible. Same deal as hitters. Replacement level is the exact same, adjusted every single year. So you can compare people across eras, which is the best value of WAR. If you want to know how good is this pitcher compared to somebody from, say, 1965, you can use WAR and have a pretty good shot of getting at a good answer to it. It also is a great way to estimate somebody's financial value to you. Modern analysts suggest one WAR, 1.0 WAR, is worth between $8 and $10 million. So you get surplus value if your pitcher is making less than that. This is why a very good screen that you should have when you're managing your front office stuff is the cost efficiency. Where is it? I don't have it. That needs to be fixed immediately. Because it's so good. It's so important. We're going to change attendance history to cost efficiency. And we're going to change revenue and expense history to cost efficient players. So Noah Schultz, we're basically getting a bargain. We're paying $217,000 for every WAR when we would expect to pay something like $30 million. We're getting a lot of surplus value there, a huge amount. Is this a perfect statistic? No. It's why I don't trust dollars per WAR that much. But it's still really, really good. It's still really, really good. Says WAR is the best way to look at a pitcher's complete value and evaluate, especially if you're getting a fair salary for him. But WAR has an extra bonus. Here's this guy, maybe you've heard of him, Shohei Ohtani, who pitches and hits and is the complete package. You can add all of his WAR together. So his hitting WAR in 2025, because he didn't pitch that year. 2024, 10.4 WAR. Seems pretty good. Why did he pitch in 2024, didn't he? That's strange. No, 2024, sorry. Yeah, that's the year he DH'd. 2023, there you go. 7.1 WAR with the bat. 1.9 WAR pitching. That means he was basically a 9-win player in 2023. That gives you a sense of how special players like Ohtani are, because you can add them together more or less and get a pretty accurate number. He's real good. He's a real good baseball player. So WAR also captures offense. It also captures defense. It captures all of the things. Yeah. So just super, super good. I'm not going to tell you WAR is the right answer in every situation. There are times when somebody will be below replacement level, but they still have something to offer that makes them useful. It's really bad for players that don't have a lot of innings pitched or a lot of plate appearances if they're hitters. It doesn't tell us anything meaningful if they don't have enough innings. Conversely, somebody has a ridiculous WAR pitching wise in 2018, like our good pal Shohei does in 51 innings. That he's this good in just 51 innings is pretty good. That tells us he's actually pitching very effectively, which is good. It is a good thing for him to do, to have a high WAR, no matter how he has it. Which makes it really useful for comparing pitchers to hitters too. So boring, predictable, maybe, but I still think it's just that good a statistic, and it's just something that's that valuable to tell you how good a player is. I know for a fact the best player on the White Sox that year was Noah Schultz. And that's very cool. I have a single number that tells me how valuable he is to me, and tells me maybe I should offer him an extension before his contract value gets too high. That's it. There are so many more statistics for pitching than there are for hitting. People have been obsessed with tracking why people are good at pitching for possibly centuries, but definitely decades. But you need to understand which statistics tell you the most information so that you can make an informed decision whether you're playing this game, playing fantasy baseball, or just watching television. When you hear, a dumbass broadcaster saying, this guy has 70 RBI, therefore he's a good hitter, and you see that he's got, like a WAR of like -2 because he just gets lots of sac flies or whatever, more information. You can look at Kenley Jansen and say, he has 30 saves, he must be an amazing pitcher. Well, his ERA says differently. More importantly, his WAR is differently. His WAR says he's a good reliever, but not a great one. And that he was significantly worse with the White Sox than he was with Toronto. Probably because he played in front of a worse team. His peripherals actually still look pretty decent, though. So, stuff for the home runs. Lesson 2 for ever thinking of becoming a Major League Baseball player. Someone says give up 5 home runs in less than 20 innings. You should tell them, no, that's a bad idea. Don't do that. What's on tap for next week? Next week is going to be a bit of an odd duck. I've actually toyed with what I would talk about next week, and I want to talk about defense, but defense is so fuzzy that I think we're going to talk about defense and ratings. I'm going to combine what's going to be 2 videos into one. Just because I'm going to be real with you, when it comes to defense statistics, a lot of my answers are going to be, just because of the way defense works. Modern defense is measured very differently than it was measured in the past, in a better way, but it's also less approachable, I think, in some ways. So knowing how defense affects your team is very important, but it's not the end-all be-all, and you don't want to spend too much time getting sucked into it. So we're talking about defense, but next week's going to be a big week. If you came to this channel to learn how to value people in baseball, you're probably at about the end of your journey with me. Because when we're talking about the next 2 videos, are video game stuff specifically. I still hope you join me, because I think it's a great game, and I think people should play it. But if you decide that you don't want to play the game, you just want to learn more about baseball, you can probably skip part of next week and definitely the entirety of the following week. Maybe. I don't know. I guess it's really up to you. So, defense and ratings next week. Hopefully we can learn a lot, and hopefully you're enjoying the series. So, thank you very much for everybody that has been commenting and sharing your thoughts. I really appreciate that. If you ever have questions, by the way, let me know. If I say something that you think sounds wrong, tell me about it. I can look into it and I can make a correction if I did get something wrong. My feelings will not be hurt. I will not cry any hard tears or hot tears because somebody said I was wrong on the internet. I'd rather you tell me I'm wrong than not tell me I'm wrong. And then I just keep saying stupid things until the end of time, and people would think I've taken leave of my senses, which maybe I have. I don't know. So next week is defense, and ratings in general, and then the following week is going to be kind of an in-depth look at how I look at how to build a roster, what kinds of things I look for, what statistics I value, what ratings I value. I'm not saying it's the right answer, But I have played a lot of OOTP over the years, and my answer is probably closer to being right than somebody who hasn't played the game as much. I'm just going to put that out there. So thank you for watching. Your viewership is always appreciated. And until next time, this has been Guardian, and I bid you good day.